Hello and welcome. Welcome to Ready.Set.Midmarket, the podcast for all things mid-market IT, brought to you by MES Computing. I'm Adam Dennison, Vice President of Midsize Enterprise Services with the Channel Company. Joining me is my co-host, Samara Lynn, Senior Editor with MES Computing. Welcome, Samara.
Thank you.
And we have two fantastic guests today. First, we have Ken Knapton. He's the CIO of Win Brands. Welcome back to the show, Ken.
Thanks so much. Great to be here.
And finally, we have Jason Williams. He's the CEO of MythWorx. Welcome, Jason. So we're here today to talk about SaaS pricing and what AI is doing to SaaS pricing. Essentially, for years, the SaaS software model has been very predictable. You bought license, you counted users, you built a budget, and you were good to go. And AI is changing that model. That's what we're going to be digging into today. But before we do that, I want to turn over to Ken first, and then Jason. Just tell us briefly a little bit about yourselves and your organizations, and then we can get into the topic around AI pricing and what that's doing to our SaaS models.
Yeah, sounds great. Again, thanks for having me. Excited to be here with you guys. Ken Knapton. I work with Win Brands. We have two major brands that we service. Costa Vida Fresh Mexican Grill is a QSR restaurant, and Fat Cats Family Entertainment is a cinema, bowling, arcade, mini golf, all under one roof. So two very different businesses, but both in the mid-market space. I've been in the mid-market myself for many years, in the CIO seat for many different companies and different industries for about 20 years. So super excited to be here with you guys today.
Great. Thank you. Jason?
Yeah. Thanks again for having me on here. I'm excited to have a conversation and meet new folks, but I'm CEO of MythWorx. So we'll tease this out a little bit later, but we're basically a neuromorphic AI company, which I'll describe that later. So think deterministic, not probabilistic. Think brain-inspired function, not LLM-based. So I think if we can talk about, we'll have a lot to talk about with how that affects mid-market. So we're early stage. My background is small startup, medium size, and enterprise, as well as academia. I'm actually a professor of practice at the University of Virginia here in Charlottesville, which is where I am calling you from. And, much like Ken, been around the block a little bit. Most recently, I was at Oracle running the startup and venture capital program and research and development as well. I've done a tour of duty at Amazon. I've had my own startups, spent time at GE, Capital One. So lots of different things in IT. But the point of it is being able to watch the cycle of IT adoption. And as some people say, history doesn't repeat itself. It sure does rhyme. And it is not. That is what's happening again today. So I'm looking forward to chatting about that with y'all.
Sounds good. So you've been at the largest of the large and at startups.
Absolutely. Correct.
Perfect. Well, we're in that mid-market sweet spot here today. So that's what we want to focus in on. Let's go ahead and get into the topic then around, sort of the new reality of SaaS and AI pricing and just what's happening there. And let's go to you first, Ken, as a practitioner. What's changed most for mid-market IT leaders when it comes to SaaS vendors kind of layering in some of these AI costs and token pricing and consumption-based pricing and things of that nature? What's been, kind of the biggest change for you over the last, say, 12 to 18 months?
Yeah. So for us, I think that there's two different ways to look at this. One is the AI capabilities that our vendors are adding into their products. And we're seeing that quite a bit. We're working with several of our vendors to help implement specific AI capabilities that we need. And in that case, the pricing, of course, it depends on the vendor, right, as to how they decide they want to proceed with that. But often those new AI capabilities are just built into the services they already provide us. And so they're just enhancing their service as a SaaS solution would do. The other area would be when we're looking at implementing AI on our own, or how we're utilizing AI within our environment, either customer facing or for our own employees, right? Efficiencies, improving workflows, things like that. That's where it gets a little more challenging, because in that case, we're not necessarily licensing based on number of users anymore, like we would, an email solution or whatever else, right? Now we're paying based on consumption. How much are people using it? And the challenge that we're facing, and I think other mid-sized companies are facing this as well, is that AI is so new. There's a lot of experimentation going on, and we don't really know how much value we're really going to get from it yet. people are experimenting with. We think we can get some value here. We think this is going to help us. And so we're starting to see some consumption. We're starting to see a lot of consumption,
Yeah.
but we're not yet seeing what we're actually going to get from that because we're just still so early in the process. And so, again, from my perspective, I really appreciate working with our vendors and having them implement features in their tools that they provide to us.
Sure.
That's the safest and least costly solution for us. But that doesn't, we can't rely on that. Have to be
What would you
on our
say
own.
is the percentage in terms of that predictability model where, go ahead and experiment, use it, let's see what we can get out of it versus the consumption-based model where you might have to look at it and say, oh shit, at the end of the month, we've got a big bill here and we want our teams to use it, but what's that balance look like?
Yeah, so we don't have a lot of internal development, and so for I think in an organization where there's a lot of developers that are using AI to help them with their custom software, I think you're going to see more of that consumption-based activity. We're still focused more on utilizing, an LLM to help analyze things and analyze data and stuff like that. So we have been spending most of our time thus far on the vendor side, working with our vendors about what should they implement that's going to benefit us. And so we haven't seen those costs kind of skyrocket. We haven't seen those costs hitting our accounting yet.
Okay.
On the other side of it, we are starting to utilize more internally because again, we can't sit back and just let our vendors do everything. We still have to implement what we can to help smooth out the workflows and from an employee headcount perspective, how can we augment what people are doing? And there, we're not seeing a lot of the consumption-based activity again yet, because we're still early in that side of it. We've been focusing on the vendor side first, helping them get what they need. Now we're just dipping our toe into the to the workforce side of it.
Gotcha.
So I expect we will see that, just not yet.
Yep,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Jason, let's get your perspective here. From you've been at various vendors out there. What has kind of changed the most on your side? And I know you've spoken about. I'm not a technologist, right? I just talk to them all day long. When you say token sprawl, what do you mean by that? And
Sure.
what are the inherent challenges there? And what should CIOs be looking out for?
It's very much what Ken was saying. The way he's described it, there's still a lot of control and relative certainty, but the best analogy is what people experience with cloud consumption. It's going to follow the same path, right? This is what I was hinting at earlier. All these technology adoption cycles, from getting off the mainframe to client server to Linux to cloud, like it all follows the following pattern. Let's experiment on it. Okay, I can see it. Then the business has to find the ROI and the value, which, Ken hinted at, like, where is it going to hit our value? We think it can do it here, here, and here. Then let's try it on a real workload that doesn't matter. Like, no one's going to get fired if it breaks. Then you do it in a production environment, right? That matters. And that's tends to be the cycle. And we're seeing that in AI. The concern, or not the concern, but the issue is very much like cloud spend, right? Like, you could, okay, I'm going to use this much cloud, and I'm going to use Redshift, or I'm going to do all this, right? And then all of a sudden you kind of let the horses loose, and then, no, I get this bill at the end of the month, exactly like you just said, Adam. And by the way, with Shadow IT, you got like 50 bills from all over the organization. That is this world in the AI consumption is ripe for that too, because you don't have to go through procurement. Even if you're an SMB, there's still like a process to acquire something, right? And Ken, there's not stopping somebody in your org or somebody not in your org slapping down an MX card and then like buying a bunch of Claude and just hitting okay, and all of a sudden you get an $8,000 bill. So that's kind of the idea of token sprawl. The other thing is where we have it technically, and that's when we start looking at widespread adoption. And in the context of, especially in the coding world, and we're seeing this as well in like the analysis and generation of analysis world, where people are getting really entrenched, not just inside their web user, but maybe they spin up a cursor instance to do really deep research. Even if they're not coding, they get something called context rot, which is a kind of an emerging term that we're seeing, where you kind of load up all the documents that you needed to analyze, And then you're like, give me the answer for this thing. And because my prompt was like, War and Peace, and it had to read all these other things, you get something called context rot. And so you're burning through sometimes 50, 60,000 tokens to get garbage answers. The problem is you don't know it's garbage until you've burned them all through. And there's ways around that, progressive disclosure and all this kind of techie stuff. But the point is that we don't know what we don't know yet. And because of that, the spend is going to be unknowable for a little while.
Yep. So let me ask you sort of a question for both of you and a real example. And it's Samara and I and the company we work for, right? So the channel company. We are being asked from the very top, use AI as much as possible. And I'll let you know it's primarily Copilot, right? So, and I don't know what our billing cycle looks like with them. I'm guessing it's more, Ken, what you were mentioning, the managed piece. But as we're using it more and more and becoming more comfortable with it, relying on it more, and those things start to possibly shift as far as pricing goes, how do you have that discussion with your business users and kind of rein them back in or help them understand what's going on? Or do you even look at it and say, all right, Ken, as the CIO of the organization, this is what I'll pick up. These departments are going crazy in AI use, and that's going up. I have to bill you back. Like, what does that look like in terms of, possible next steps down the road? We want our users to use it. We want them to get value out of it. And then does all of a sudden, do we get priced out of the model and usage?
Yeah. So for me, it comes down to really there's two kind of answers to that question. The one, I think Jason touched on it a minute ago. We've been down this road before. This is not new, right? The whole cloud migration, the whole cloud transformation. This is just, a repeat of that same movie, right? People moved all their stuff out to the cloud and everything was great. And then all of a sudden they got this big bill because developers were firing up servers that nobody knew about and, all the consumption, right? And that's really what it comes down to is the consumption. How much are we using? And so that really is a governance question. So the question comes down to how do we go about, again, the example that Jason used, right? Somebody slapping down their Amex card and just signing up for, Copilot or GPT or whatever else. And so we ran into that. We've recently set a policy that, look, we're not going to pay for any subscriptions for your own personal stuff, right? If you want to have these other GPTs, these other solutions, that's great. We're not paying for them. We also settled on Copilot, just like you guys did. So we've got Copilot. That's what we're using. If you want to, not if you want to, we're encouraging people to use it, but to use the one that we have chosen. So that's a governance thing, right? And that once we put the governance in place, then we can start to manage and maintain that from a policy perspective. Now, the question you mentioned about, how do we divvy that up? If marketing is using, more capabilities, more tokens, more usage than others, we already divvy that up by department. So
Sure.
We know who the users are, what they're doing, and that's where those bills get funneled into that budget. And so we already do that within our organization. And I suspect most other mid-sized enterprises are probably doing that as well. Yeah. Allocating it back to the department for usage.
Yep. Jason, what's your perspective there?
Yeah. I mean, it's not unusual. It's what Ken just described is I think a best practice and typical. We are serving some SMBs that have to be in a little bit different bucket, which is why we're there. And just to be clear, like what we're doing from an AI perspective is not LLM based, because for us, it has to be deterministic. It can't be predictive. LLMs are obviously all predictive with a certain level of hallucination, which in many cases are acceptable. A lot of our clients, it's not acceptable to have any hallucinations, and there needs to be provenance, like chain of custody on how the answer was derived. So if you're in a regulated industry or healthcare, or I could think of an example where we have a customer that we work with very closely we have several racing customers, like motorsports. And, if you had a variance on something, that means, P2 versus very at the end of the pack. That's a big deal. And so we don't use tokens at all. So we're non-LLM based. So for us, our story is saying like LLMs are great, do it where it works, but there are other ways. And some of these SMBs cannot follow the pattern where like this LLM's good for me for coding or whatever, but I still can't use a public version of it. Even if I'm on the private one, I can't afford to have my data out there. So then we start looking at how do we implement SLMs for these guys, or specialized LLMs that are, 300 billion parameters or smaller that aren't like with our frontier models, but they're not like 1.5 trillion, whatever. And so what that allows us to do for these guys is the price prediction is so much better because now I don't like it's all you can eat. Now it's just a part of like, can you stand this up on infrastructure that's more sovereign than instead of like leaning totally on, a Gemini or a Claude or a Copilot. Again, because some of our customers, whether it's oil and gas or healthcare or research or racing, they can't afford not because of the finances, but because of security, that they're just not comfortable with having their stuff out in the wild. And so the alternative solution is, well, we our AI, of course, does not use an LLM at its core. For the places where we do facilitate LLM training, it allows them to stand up their models on-prem or on a sovereign cloud. And then all of a sudden, now it's just good old CPU infrastructure prediction. And there's a lot of freedom in that for them. So I think, again, this is very similar to what the cloud journey was. People are like, oh gosh, I can't do it because of HIPAA, or now I feel comfortable about it, but I'm not sure I can do this, or, we could do letter generation on there, but I'm not putting my code on there, or I'm not, you know what I mean? So we're still in a little bit of the wild, wild west that looks a lot like things did in 2015 in the cloud space.
Is that your target? You're a relatively young company. Is that your target market? The highly regulated or highly unpredictable user bases. Is that pretty much the target, or do you go for a certain company size, or would a company like Ken's eventually be one that would be
absolutely. We have a big chunk of our customers that are SMBs. But they're SMBs that are saying, I can't put my stuff out there because I don't want to, I don't understand it, or I don't trust it. The second group of them are, the answers have to be right every single time, and I need proof. You just don't have proof in an LLM because the proof is actually another probabilistic calculation, and and it's like hallucinations are very fine in many and maybe most cases. It depends, but that's where we are. So, it's as important to SMBs as enterprise because, maybe more so because the zeros aren't as big. So the margin of error is tighter.
Right. Samara, we'll get you in the discussion here. Questions you have for the gentleman?
Yeah. Well, I have one for each of you. Ken, I thought it was very interesting how you said you're already kind of divvying up like compute budget among different departments. Who oversees that? Is that an IT function? Is that a finance function?
Yeah, so it is kind of combined between the two. IT still oversees the governance across the whole organization. So we ensure that people have the appropriate licenses if they need to, get more usage or they need to increase their budget for what they're needing to use. That goes through us as far as the approval. But then as far as how it gets allocated out to the departments, that's all done through finance. And so it is a partnership between them. But we still govern, right, the entire organization when it comes to their usage of it.
And Jason, one of the things that intrigued me with MythWorx as I researched it was this idea of this alternate pricing for AI. I know you've positioned the company as a way to avoid all this token pricing, and maybe I missed it when some of the questions Adam asked you. But what is specifically the alternate method you build your customers?
We don't use the type of technology that requires tokens. And without getting like nerdy and technical, that allows us to stick things onto servers and then price it by cores or CPUs, which a lot of CIOs are used to doing. That's how they bought at Microsoft, SQL Server, Oracle, things like that. And so your prediction pricing is like, okay, how many cores am I going to use? 10. Great. It costs this much. And I don't care how many cores you ask it. It doesn't matter. As opposed to pure consumption, which is by them, from the cloud world, it's like, by the hour or now by the second. And so if somebody goes nuts in your organization, you don't have the right governance, you're going to go way over. And so so we don't price that way because we don't use tokens. And that's the way that we're able to do that. We do have consumption-based pricing on hourly, but that's just if you happen to be on AWS or Google or our own sovereign cloud and you only pay for what you use, but it's still a very predictive price. So you could ask it 800 million questions within the hour, and it's not going to cost more than that. It won't cost less if you only ask 2 questions.
Okay, I got that, sort of.
Are you in a relatively unique space, MythWorx by itself, or is this a new category that's sort of developing?
It's an emerging category called
Okay.
neuromorphic computing. So we model our AI based on brain function. So I'll give you a super quick example. When you ask an LLM, what's, the boiling point of water,
Mhm.
a current LLM that's a frontier model like that you use today might have 1.5 trillion parameters. It's going to ask about 300 billion parameters what that question is. So all those neurons are firing. So it takes a ton of energy, takes all the data center. That's why everybody's hair is on fire about building more data centers. The way it works in your brain is when I ask you the boiling point of water, the parts of your brain that understand that math fire, not the literature part, the theology part, all the other math part that you get, just those parts, called a spiking neural network. So that means the rest of your brain is relatively quiet, which means no energy is consumed. So your brain uses 20 watts. 20 watts is all you get to do all the cool things that you do. That's not how LLMs work at the data centers. And so what we're trying to do is like, man, let's look towards creation and how that is being done to be more efficient. So we prune our neurons. Like when you sleep, your brain prunes to be more efficient. We do the same thing. So that's kind of how we're doing it. So that is called neuromorphic computing. It's kind of, mostly you see it in the university research areas, but there's
Okay.
IBM, Intel, a brain chip will make chips that optimize the neuromorphic chip. We can use those, but we can also do them on CPUs. So GPUs are not required for us, which is also a really magical thing for costs. So yeah.
So let's bring it back down. Going to be a couple minutes left. Let's bring it back down to kind of steps that a mid-market CIO can do, right? When they're thinking about where their pricing models are going, what are some of the pitfalls they should look out for? What are some of the questions they should be asking of vendors? Yeah.
We've been down this road before. We've seen this movie. We know how it ends. AI is just a new implementation of it, but we went through this with cloud before. And so I would say, that the things that I would put top of mind as we look at contract negotiations, as we look at, how do we want to go about bringing this technology into our organization? First of all, don't ever surprise your CFO, right? Accounting does not like to be surprised. So make sure that they're involved in the conversation. Make sure that anything consumption based, you're going to want to have limits, right? Make sure you know what the limits are, that they're listed in the contract. That you know what's going to happen when you hit those limits. Do you just automatically go to the next tier? So those are the kinds of things you want to make sure when you're negotiating that you understand, right? And again, just make sure that you have good governance in place, that it's not just a matter of signing the contract and letting everybody loose. It's a matter of understanding who needs to use this, how much are they going to use it, what do they do when they hit a wall, when they feel like they need more consumption, who do they go to? And how do you audit that?
It's very similar to cloud. I totally get that. But is it not multiplied and magnified more? Because I just think about myself. I don't remember once in my 25-year career spinning up my own cloud. But I could absolutely see myself, working on, getting prepared for one of our big MES events. And I'm, preparing for all the speakers and the questions. I'm always back and forth with AI. And I think every single user in an organization could be someone like that, where they wouldn't necessarily be on the cloud side. So is it not magnified? Still the same governance principles, I think, but I feel like there could be more seepage or something like that out there that would happen.
Man,
yeah, for sure. It's definitely it's definitely more magnified for sure. I'll just say one quick thing, because I know, Jason, you wanted to react to that as well. But from the CIO chair, we've been through this. We know developers didn't really care either about how many servers they were spinning up. Right? They didn't have any desire to be controlled in any way, right? So from my seat, it really is just a matter of scale. It's the same problem. We know how to deal with it because we dealt with it before. Now, yes, there are more people involved, but that's just a scale issue.
Just a super short answer to dovetail into what Ken was saying to your question before is like the governance spot. The way I like to start it out with our customers is to engage with what I would call ripping this off from the 80s, defense sector, is an AI capability maturity model. And so, we hear these AI conversations and we can understand what the end is and the goodness and the happy path, but how do I start it at my organization? What I find is that at an SMB, any size organization, it could be a $5 million to $150 million company, that their ability to start the journey depends on where they are today, from data cleansing, data security, goal, all the things. And it's also, there's not parity within the department. Like finance could be level 2, manufacturing could be level 0. And so when we start these conversations, we like to sit down with the CIO and say like, hey, let us help you engage on a journey, like a customer journey. And so what's your maturity? Are you a level 0? And is the goal 5 or is it 4? Do we want this engaged and embedded in the org, and which part of the org? Is it just HR? Is it manufacturing? Is it design? Is it customer service? Because everybody's going to have a different beginning point and journey. So that's how we like to answer that question.
Awesome. I want to be respectful at times. Anyone have any final parting comments or suggestions for the audience?
Just grateful to be here. It's good to meet all y'all.
Great discussion. We covered a lot. And I like I said, I learned a lot. I took a lot of notes down. If you saw my pen bouncing back and forth.
That's great.
It's always fun to hang out with you guys. Yeah. Thanks so much for the invitation back.
Thank you so much, Jason. Thank you, Ken. Samara, as always, we will see you probably next month now for our next episode of Ready.Set.Midmarket. And we're certainly looking forward to seeing everybody down in Marco Island, Florida in mid-September, where we'll have 150 folks like Ken Knapton there, all being ready to talk about AI pricing and what's going on with their SaaS bills and things of that nature. So thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.